Hey, it's Debbie Potts, and I'm going to talk to my friend Serena about a big topic you all seem to love to learn more about, the carnivore diet. Who needs it? Why should you do a carnivore diet? When should you do one? How long? All those questions. So I would love for you to put in your questions and comments below when you listen to this so we can do a follow-up. We're doing an IG live coming up soon, and we will go over those questions specifically on IG live on Coach Debbie Potts. And when do you need a food elimination diet? What are the signs that you should do a food elimination diet? How long should you do carnivore, or do you always do it? I think that's a choice. A lot of people say 30-day, good reset, and then reintroduce foods. We'll talk to Serena. I know she's been 3 years or more carnivore. I'm more meat-based. I don't really have any signs and symptoms of needing to do a strict elimination diet, though I do want to lose 5-10 pounds, honestly. And I think it's individualize it. I like more ketovore. I feel it's too strict to do a carnivore, but I know, as I did in a previous podcast, Nutrition by Judy has great information on her page and podcast about who should do one when you have a lot of symptoms of gut stress. So let's bring on Serena. Hold on. All right, you guys wanted to hear more carnivore-based podcasts, so I knew exactly who to bring on the show. Serena, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Debbie. I'm excited.
Well, you have been in carnivore. You've kind of made it's funny. I was looking at your Instagram, how much you've done the last few years, establishing yourself as the carnivore revolution and really sharing your story along the way. Tell us a little bit about you and your why and purpose. We'll dive into all things carnivore that you have experienced.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I became a carnivore, first I want to preface with I had lifelong, basically, disordered eating and eating disorders since I was 12, basically. My sister was anorexic and then became bulimic. And so I just kind of learned like that seemed normal to me. And so at 12, I bought my first diet pills. And then at 48, I was still struggling with all of that, with binge eating, with just constant thinking about food and what I was going to eat next and how I was going to make it fit into whatever plan I was doing, whether I was juice fasting or vegan or vegetarian or plant-based, or if I was on the cabbage soup diet or Jenny Craig or Weight Watchers. You name the diet, I've probably done it. And that's a hard place to be constantly thinking about that. Not in the same way I think about steak a lot now. Totally different way of thinking about food. And I would go to Sam's to go grocery shopping, and I would buy, that giant bag of drizzle popcorn. Have you seen that with the chocolate, the dark chocolate and the white chocolate on it? It's so good. And I would put 2 bags in the cart. I would open one while I was shopping, and I would eat it while I was shopping. I would eat it on the way home. Then I would hide that bag like in the garage somewhere, and I would take up the new bag, and everybody would open it and eat some. And then at some point when nobody was paying attention, I would bring the more than half eaten bag. And this is like a giant party size popcorn. I would bring what was left up, a little bit, and put it in the cabinet, and everybody would be like, "Oh, I thought this popcorn was gone. Oh, I'm so excited." And everybody would eat the rest of the popcorn. And that's hard because that was all the time for me. It was like every time I was alone, I wanted to just eat junk food, and so at 48 years old, that's just kind of sucks, and I had found peace over the years with certain things. When I was plant-based for a long time, I did find peace in that, but I also found bloat and tiredness and just not feeling 100%. When I was juice fasting, I would say, aside from carnivore, that juice fasting was my other happy place because I felt like I had control over everything. And what I have realized now is that I think the reason that worked for me best and the reason carnivore works for me best, and I'm not advocating juicing. I do think juicing has a lot of drawbacks. But for me, it's about compartmentalization. And so we can talk about that more later, but I was only drinking juice and now I only eat animal products. And that seems to work for me, and not as a way of being another eating disorder, but as a way
Yeah.
of finding peace and calm, within myself.
Mm.
So I was almost 48, and I ended up with this post-sickness issue where things tasted and smelled rotten. And it lasted 2 years and 8 months. It actually lasted until last summer. It started that very first year of that sickness. And I got sick in December. And when my taste and smell started to come back, like it was really muted for a couple of months. And then all of a sudden, I woke up one day and thought like our dog had been sprayed by a skunk. And my husband was like, "No, I don't smell anything. I just made a cup of coffee." And I was like, "What? Why does it smell like that?" And it took a couple of days for me to realize what's happening here. It was horrible. We go roller skating on Wednesdays a lot. We homeschool, and they have a homeschool state on Wednesdays. And every time they would drop new fries or they would put a pizza in the oven, I would have to like cover my mouth with my sweater because it smelled so bad. It was like this for 2 years and 8 months. So anyway, this was the beginning of it for me. It had been about 3 months of dealing with that, and it was horrible. My husband came home one day, found me in our camper crying because our daughter was making eggs and I couldn't be in the house. I mean, it was that bad for months. And I was basically sustaining myself on baked goods. My girls had a gluten-free baking business at the time, and they made the best cupcakes and the best strawberry cake, and like they just had the best foods. And so I was basically just eating those because the sugar was the only thing that didn't, sugary things were the only things that didn't really taste and smell rotten to me. And along with, I knew that I could eat some meat fresh off the grill, only certain cuts, like a New York strip and a fresh hamburger, but I couldn't refrigerate them and warm them again. Some sort of weird chemical reaction made them smell and taste horrible. And so I was just surviving basically on these baked goods, and I was miserable. I was gaining weight. I was bloated. I was puffy. I just was miserable. Like I didn't feel good. And I think honestly, that's how most people feel all the time, because most people are eating those foods all the time. And I actually probably felt better than most people do because these were at least homemade baked goods. They weren't, processed garbage. They were homemade stuff where I could pronounce all of the ingredients. And so anyway, I was miserable, crying every day. Like I couldn't understand why this was happening to me. It was just left over from the sickness. It's called parosmia. It actually happens to a lot of chemotherapy patients too. But it was really, really hard. I had to leave people's homes. I had to leave parties that we would be at because of things they were making. Eventually I bought like this little ring, a silicone ring I could put like on the tip of my nose that I could put essential oils on. So I would smell that instead of, whatever else it was. But this was very, very hard. And so I felt miserable. And on my birthday weekend, when I turned 48, my girls made me cupcakes, and I said, double the batch. And I ate 20 cupcakes in 36 hours. That's where I was, I was like, that's what I was doing. And so that was a terrible binge weekend for me. And I woke up on Monday morning and like I was puffy and swollen, and my eyes hurt and my head hurt and my joints hurt. I mean, that feeling where like you roll out of bed, and like people will resonate with this, I think, and you sit on the other bed and you're like before you get up, like you got to reset everything before you get up. And that's how I was feeling every day. I was just not feeling well. And so this Monday morning, I went for a little run, and I came home and I was sitting out on our back deck getting some sun. And I just thought, something's got to change. I can't do this. I'm killing myself, right? Like fruits, vegetables, garlic, onion, peanut butter, popcorn, coffee, they all smelled like a rotten skunk carcass somebody had lit on fire. I mean, it was just horrible. And so I was like, okay, so I don't have to just eat the sweets though. Like what else have I been eating? What can I eat? Hamburger, New York strip. I'm just going to eat that. And so I sat out on our porch thinking about that for a couple of hours, getting my vitamin D for the day. This was May. And so then I just started doing research, like, what does this mean if I just eat like how long can I do that? How long can I eat just a New York strip and some burgers before I get sick? And so I started Googling it, and I found people like Kelly Hogan, and I found the Sean Baker, Joe Rogan podcast, which is how like 95% of people find out about carnivore. I found Laura Spath. I found lots of people who were basically just eating meat. And I was like, what in the world? How is that even possible? Like, it just seems so bizarre to me. And I had a friend who had told me a couple of years before that he was going to be a carnivore, and I didn't know what it meant. I knew he was just eating meat, and I thought he was insane. And so I just kind of let like settle in that day, like just watching videos, doing research, like all day long, and then all week long, and then all month long while I was eating my hamburgers and my steak. And it did, my taste and smell did start to get a little bit better. Did it get better faster because of the meat? I don't know, but I knew that I had water fasted for 5 days at one point, and it had gotten completely better. This was before I started carnivore, a couple of weeks before I started carnivore, and it had gotten completely better, completely went away. And I was so excited. And within 24 hours of eating, it had come back again. So I knew there was something to the autophagy. There was something to the healing process that goes along with like fasting. And I was reading that carnivore could kind of give you some of those same benefits, like it's a fasting mimicking diet, depending on how much fat you eat versus how much protein. And so I had high hopes that it was going to help me. It did end up taking 2 years and 8 months, but that was why I became a carnivore initially. And it was about 6 months in, I was listening to a podcast and I heard somebody talk about the difference between an abstainer and a moderator. And it was like, that was my light bulb moment. It was 6 months in. I didn't know I was better. I didn't know that I didn't have disordered eating anymore, that I didn't have an eating disorder anymore until I heard that. And I was like, oh my goodness, there's a reason that I never ate one Oreo. There's a reason I ate 20 cupcakes in 36 hours. There's a reason I can't, open up a bag of chips and fold it up and put it back in the cabinet with chips still in it. Like, it's because I'm an abstainer. I had no idea what that meant. And so I try to like push that message with people. So the everything in moderation thing doesn't work for everybody. I'll talk about that more later. But for me, that was the key. And once I heard the difference between an abstainer and a moderator, it was like all the pieces came together of my puzzle. It was like, so this is why I have to eat this way. And so if I hadn't been committed before that, I was committed then. And I've slipped up a few times, here and there, but for the most part, 100% carnivore. It's where I find my peace. It's like you get that, I've heard people call it the carnivore zen. You get like this carnivore zen when you just eat animal products. And so, yeah, so it's been 3 years and 3 months now for me, and I'm never going back. I'm never going back to just kind of like your normal diet.
So you seem to love it more because of the food addiction part. Do you think it sounds like that not having that moderator versus abstain with the carbohydrate and the carb addiction more than the food sensitivities?
Yeah, absolutely. I've been gluten-free for probably 10 or 11 years. And what I love about so my point there was that even gluten-free junk food is junk food, right? Just because the gluten-free Oreo doesn't make it better for you.
Exactly.
I mean,
Thank you.
have celiac disease, but it doesn't really because an Oreo is an Oreo and it's just garbage. And so for me, I think the compartmentalizing things, like I mentioned before, is like, if it fits in this box, I can eat it, right? So if it fits in the animal-based box, I can eat it. And for me, that takes all the other choices away and just makes it so much easier for me to know what I'm eating. And for people who think it's boring because you eat the same things all day, every day, the truth is most people eat the same things all day, every day. People have a standard.
That's so true.
Right? People have a standard breakfast. People who eat oatmeal for breakfast, they do it for health reasons, and they eat oatmeal every day.
Health reasons,
right? Exactly.
Nothing healthy.
You pack almost the same thing every day. You might vary things here and there, but if you eat a sandwich for lunch, that's about the same as me either eating a hamburger or a steak for lunch. You might vary what you put in the sandwich. It might be peanut butter and jelly one day, and it might be turkey and ham the next, but you're eating a sandwich. And for me, I'm eating meat. So if you go to a fast food restaurant, and most people do that, lots of people do that every day, you're getting a hamburger and fries or a chicken sandwich and fries. Well, guess what? I'm eating eggs with bacon or eggs with sausage, or I'm having deviled eggs, or there's just such a big variety of foods. People just, when you say I only eat meat, people just automatically picture like red meat or steak. And they think, how could you just eat that? But for most of us carnivores that aren't on the lion diet, which is just ruminant animals, salt and water, we have very broad variety of foods. And I can moderate these foods better than I can a bag of chips. Like a steak is going to tell me when I'm full. Eggs are going to tell me when I'm full, but those other foods are actually designed scientifically to not, like, your body doesn't know those things are food. Your body doesn't know when to tell you it's done because it doesn't recognize that as filling it up. And they're scientifically designed that way. They are designed to have a bliss point That's the point where it has exactly the right amount of fat, salt, and sugar to get your brain addicted to it. And so meat doesn't do that. And so for me, it's all about that compartmentalization. If I don't eat those other things, I think that's why juicing worked for me. I was just juicing. That's what I was eating. That's what I was drinking, was just the homemade fresh juices. And so that was easy for me. I mean, I missed food, but that was easy because I knew what I was doing, right? But you put me on something like Weight Watchers or, even a whole foods diet, I could go berserk on a whole foods diet too, because I still can't moderate certain things very well. Like a whole foods diet is too big of a box for me, I guess you could say. And so just doing the animal products limits it enough that I don't feel limited, but also just has such a broad spectrum of things that I can eat. But again, it's that box, it's that compartmentalization, I think, that makes me happy. Like it's nice and organized. I can find things when I need them. And it's all just right there in that box for me. And that helps me to abstain from the other foods and just, keeps my mind sane, I guess.
Yeah, I can see that. Makes so much sense to me. Now, have you ever done a genetic report to see your carb intolerance? As I've done that, and I'm really intolerant to carbs, and I'll add that all the different genetic tests I've done, I always try to see, okay, they should say the same because it's the same person doing genetics, but what reports. And I'm always a carb intolerant on the reports and prone to type 2 diabetes. So there's, that part that I don't do well with carbohydrates, and of course not getting crappy carbs, but just choosing more berries and vegetable kind of thing or potatoes. But it's more for me, I went to more low carb because I overeat them. Same thing. Like if I have that bag of popcorn or gluten-free crackers, even if they're organic, whatever, same thing you're saying, that I'll eat the whole box. If
Yeah.
there's a basket of bread and I'm in Italy and it's, fresh made or something, I'll still want to eat the whole thing.
Right.
It's the same thing to me that I can't just have one. So I
Right.
wonder if that's kind of a genetic thing that some people can control their carb intake. For me, or metabolic typing too, that carbs don't fill me up. I could eat and eat and eat. And that's why the other reason why I, will overeat them, because they don't make me full and satiated. So if I have to eat meat to feel full, which I do, or else I'm like, okay, I still don't feel full and satisfied. I need something else. And so that's, to me, makes sense for my body that I need more protein. So I was
Yeah.
just curious.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And it's always been that way for me, but I can overeat potatoes too. Like, I mean, I've done that with potatoes, like gorged, like binged on potatoes. And I tell myself it's okay because it's a potato. And then I have binged on kale sauteed in coconut oil with salt on it, like eating, the giant bag from Sam's of the chopped up
Mm.
kale. And I had a friend tell me one day when I was telling her, I can't believe I just did that. I ate that entire bag of kale. I had to make more for my family to go with dinner. She said, I've never heard anybody feel bad about eating too much kale, but I was miserable. I was
Yeah.
sick from eating that much kale. I mean, I
Mhm.
did not feel good at all. And so like for me, it's basically all carbs. I
Yeah.
just can't moderate them. And so, if that tells you anything, if I can't moderate kale, so you've got a problem if you can't moderate kale.
Yeah, I think that'd be genetics. And there's sometimes we do metabolic typing diet that you look at how you feel, how you respond to certain foods. And some people can do well with more carbohydrates. Look at ancestral health. I think there's others that can't, and you feel full. So I think it leads to binging and overeating and having carb addiction because we don't have that I'm full button saying I'm done. Where
Right.
I've been with other people growing up, like, okay, how can you I could eat all of that, how can I stop? And that same thing, like even potatoes. I get that.
Right.
Seems common.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
so you mentioned some bloating. So common symptoms of people that we talked that I recorded a podcast, just a solo podcast on food sensitivities, food that makes you feel bloated and gassy and indigestion. And a lot of the symptoms that Judy Cho talks about, I'm a nutritional therapy practitioner, but she really focuses on the carnivore diet cure to help heal and alleviate a lot of these problems because it's always root cause medicine. Why is this happening? And fix that. And so she'll do, a 30-day elimination diet or longer for people that have gas, bloating, whatever symptoms. You had a little bit of that you mentioned, but it was more the food addiction, but you found that was alleviated with the carnivore diet.
Yeah, I feel like most people have that and they think like I did, it's
Normal.
just, yeah, it's normal. Like it's normal to be bloated after you eat. It's normal to feel sluggish at 10:30 in the morning, 3:30 in the afternoon, and 7:30 at night when your blood sugar crashes. Like I think people just think those things are normal. Like the feeling I was telling you about where I would sit up on the end of my bed and like take that deep breath, like because getting up was hard, like until your
Mhm.
muscles warmed up, like you feel like you got to stretch as soon as you wake up, or like you get out of bed and you're just like hunched over for the first few minutes and stuff. I thought that was normal. That's not normal at all. I mean, I hop right out of bed now. But the idea that all of those things are normal, like at the end of Sally Norton's book called Toxic Superfoods, she says, what if all the things that we think are because we're getting old aren't? I mean, I'm paraphrasing, I don't know the exact words, but that was
Yeah.
like another eye-opening moment for me. It was like, right, what if those things aren't because we're getting old? What if we're just supposed to be old and then we die? What if we don't have to have Alzheimer's and dementia and arthritis and all of those things? What if we don't have to have those things? What if those things are because of the superfoods and the processed foods that we're eating? So anyway, but I did want to say that, like with Judy Cho, I think one of the most awesome things about the carnivore diet is that it is the ultimate elimination diet. And so
Mhm.
you can take everything else out, just eat meat. You won't have any of those symptoms. You won't be bloated. You won't have those energy crashes 3 or 4 times a day because your glucose is going down. You won't feel like that. So then after 30, 60, or 90 days, some people say they're going to do 30 and end up doing 60 or 90 because they feel so good. Some people do a year. I know a lot of people that are posting on Instagram these days and YouTube where they've been carnivore for a year and they're starting to add some fruits back in and kind of see how they feel. So that's the best way to do it. If you think you can moderate things, the best way to use the carnivore diet, if you don't want to be a carnivore forever, is to use it for those 30, 60, or 90 days. And then you can add foods back in like one at a time and see how they make you feel. I've experimented a little bit with a handful of blueberries or an avocado. And I don't really notice a difference, except that I do crave more of them. Like when I'm allowing myself to eat an avocado, I want 3 avocados.
Mm.
So that's a problem. Eating
Yeah.
one avocado isn't really enough for me. I want 3 of them. And so that's a problem. So I probably should stay away from avocados. Same thing with blueberries. If I eat a handful of blueberries, I want the whole container of blueberries. Same thing with strawberries. Like all of the things that a lot of people find to be safe foods to add back in, I still have a hard time with. So yeah.
Yeah, it's like I'm just writing that down. Safe foods that we have in our head that they're, especially if you have a history of eating disorders and binge foods that you know which are not good for you, that are trigger foods. And if they're healthy carbohydrates, as you're saying,
Right.
berries or potatoes, kale, well, I don't know, kale's like questionable nowadays
Yeah.
if that's really good for us, but the
Yeah.
safe foods that don't set you off. So you almost have to know your triggers. Okay, I
Yes.
can't have this in the house, like homemade cookies or, a bag of popcorn, even though it's made in the coconut oil. Like
Right.
it is knowing yourself well enough what you should have not around, but also solutions, strategies when you have that interaction with that food. Have you dealt with how to react to certain things if you are exposed to foods that in a public environment or a friend's or family's house that would be triggers?
Yeah. If I allow myself to have just one of something, it's all over. Like there is no going back for me.
Yeah.
At Christmas time, I knew that we were celebrating with family a couple of days before Christmas, and then we were doing our own Christmas Eve, and we were going to go out for Mexican food. And so I knew that a few days in advance that we were doing that. And 2 days before Christmas, we went to my mother-in-law's and somebody gave me a little box of chocolate and I ate them. And then I ate several of the other things that were there. It was like, well, I'm going to eat Mexican food tomorrow anyway, so it's
Yeah.
okay. And then I was going to fast that whole day up until we went out for Mexican food. And instead, I ate multiple other things that day because I'm going off anyway. I'm going to have Mexican food later anyway. And then I proceeded to eat my weight in tortilla chips because it was okay because I was taking the day off. I mean, I probably ate more tortilla chips than I've ever eaten. And Mexican food has always been a thing for me. Mexican is my absolute favorite.
Me
Um,
too.
Yeah, and I mean, I think so many people, those chips, they bring those chips to the table and like they just
Don't
keep
bring them.
refilling it. They keep
I know.
refilling them. They're so good. And so like, but I just decided I can do this. It's one day, it'll be okay. And that led to 4 or 5 days of boxes of chocolate covered cherries and like all the Christmas foods. I was a mess. Christmas morning, I woke up and as soon as I went downstairs, I was crying. Like I ruined Christmas for me. Everybody else was fine. Like, you know,
Mhm.
I can just kind of act normal, but I was miserable. And looking back on pictures and videos I made like that morning, you can see that my eyes are all swollen and my face is puffy. And I feel like you can see it in my eyes that I was sad. You know, I just didn't feel like myself. I didn't feel good. And I'm always advocating like, why do I eat this way on vacation? Why do I stick with it even on vacation? Yes, even on vacation, it's so I can feel my best. I want to feel great when I'm on vacation, right? I want to feel great on the holidays. I don't want to, you know, go to Thanksgiving dinner and come home, you know, a bloated, full, miserable mess who needs a nap and then wake up the next day, you know, with a carb hangover and, you know, feeling like garbage. I want to enjoy the holidays, right? And so this was the first Christmas, I think, where I had done that. And it was miserable and I won't do it this year for sure.
Mhm.
So yeah, it's so hard. Now I don't have a problem like at our girls basketball or volleyball games when there's all kinds of other food around. And I don't usually have a hard time. We went to a family cookout on Saturday and there was all kinds of stuff, right? But there were also hamburgers. My father-in-law makes the most delicious steak. There were some hot dogs. And so I filled up my plate with meat while everybody else was eating all of the other stuff. And I was perfectly happy. And I didn't feel
Mhm.
at all like I wanted those things. And then I'll bring things for myself, like I'll bring some carnivore snacks with a cheese dip. So if I want to have that, I can kind of feel, you know, a little bit normal. And there have been times where I've made for something like that, like for the holidays, I've made like a really good keto crustless cheesecake or something so that if I do get tempted when everybody else is eating dessert, I can have that. You know, the good news is
Mm.
nobody else eats it because it's not very sweet. You know, I make it very,
Yeah.
very lightly sweet with, you know, monk fruit sweetener or something, and people eat it and they're like, what is this? This doesn't even taste good. And I'm like, oh, well, that's mine. You know, if you don't like it, that's
Yeah.
fine. But there's whipped cream if you want some whipped
Done
cream.
that so many
Um,
times.
yeah. And so there have been times where I'll do that, but I do tend to overeat that. So I try not to do it as much. But I think that if you're committed, you can go to functions like that and not be tempted. And I'm very rarely tempted. There have
Mhm.
been times, but not usually in a setting like that because I feel like I have to be a good example. I feel like I have to stick to my guns, right? If people
Yeah.
know how we eat, going off in front of other people is, you know, kind of challenging because you don't want to feel like, I mean, sometimes
Mhm.
it's okay if you feel like you can take a day off. But I know I can't. So I feel convicted, especially like in front of other people, to not do that, if that makes sense.
Well, a few thoughts. One, it's similar, and we've talked about this with other people. My friend Mary Roberts, we're going to do another podcast too on this, but it's like a alcoholism. You know, an alcoholic can't have one drink and go back the next day. And that's what
Yeah.
I think when people are addicted to carbohydrates or sugars or, you know, they are, even you said avocados. I mean, if you have your certain foods that are triggers, you have to avoid them. It's just the same with an alcoholic going to
Yes.
have a not, I mean, I even believe this with alcoholics that I have family members that are, and the non-alcoholic drinks to me are a trigger because that fake beer is still a beer. And that's just, I seen this
Yeah.
happen.
You're right.
Like, okay, are you going to just revert to the real alcohol drinks? Because I think they still have some
Yeah.
alcohol in those drinks, but that is just a big thing that you still have that addiction. Other comment I want to throw in too is I really think it's important for people that are social media influencers, as you've become on your Carnivore Revolution, your platform, that I think it's so inspirational to be real and show your struggles. It really annoys me that people just show, of course, social media, happy, you know, everything's perfect. I don't have any issues. I'm strict carnivore all the time. I don't have any struggles. I'm cured. I don't have any food addiction issues. And I think it's really important to show when we are struggling that this is real. You know, here's how I'm navigating through this. Here's what I'm learning about myself. And here's how I'm going to course correct. I just can't have that food and here's my mindset and I have to rewire my brain. But I think that's an important part of our social media now that we need to show when we're
Mhm.
struggling and know that the struggle's real. And I was doing that the other week. I was having a hard day. I'm like, this is what's going on. I I'm
Mhm.
frustrated and, I need to show that. So
Mhm.
I did a little thing like today's a shitty day,
Yeah,
you know,
right.
and that's not always, I'm perfect. So thank
Mhm.
you for sharing that. But hopefully you do share those struggles because that is a learning opportunity for you and other people going, oh, okay, she's not
Right.
just, it's not that easy all the time.
Right. And I think there are some people who don't struggle at all with carnivore. They don't have
Mhm.
cravings. I think there are some people that they know what they need to do, really dedicated, really committed people who know what they need to do and don't waver. I think there are some people like that. I unfortunately am not 100% like that. And I think
Mhm.
most people aren't. I
No.
think the average person is addicted to carbohydrates, whether they want to believe it or not, they
Yeah.
are. And if you don't think that carb and sugar addiction is as bad as alcohol or drugs, I challenge you to 30 days with no processed food, no carbohydrates, and no sugar. And you see
Mhm.
what those withdrawal symptoms are like. And when you inevitably give in on day 2 or 3 and say, this is so stupid, I'm not doing this, I could totally give it up if I wanted to, and you go back to eating it, know that that's your
Yeah.
addiction. When you walk
Mhm.
into an office building or a bank and there's a bowl of mint sitting on the counter, your
Mhm.
brain lights, you don't need that mint because
Mhm.
you have bad breath. You need that mint because your brain lit up when you saw it, and that's why you reach for the mints. That's why you took 2 more and you put them in your pocket. You don't know that that's why. People don't
Yeah.
realize that that's why, but that's why. It's because you're addicted to the sugar. When your brain lights up when you see those, that's a problem. And that happens to most people. That happens to me still. When I see that bowl of mints, I want one. I want one of those mints, I want those foods. I am not the kind of carnivore that can honestly say I don't want those foods anymore. I do.
Mhm.
I am a carbohydrate and sugar addict, and most people are. And so
Mhm.
if you think you're not, and you think it's a hoax, and you think all things in moderation
Mhm.
and that this is garbage, then try it. Go for 30 days. I dare you to go for 30 days without any processed food, nothing out of a package, no sugar, just eat whole foods. If you want to incorporate a little bit of fruit, fine, but just eat whole foods for 30 days and you will find it harder than you think. And maybe you'll realize that it actually is a problem for most people. It is a real thing. Carbohydrate and sugar addiction is real. And I've heard recently it kills more people than alcohol and drugs do because
Really?
so many of our diseases are based on our poor metabolic health,
Mhm.
which is caused by the foods that we're eating. There's hands down, that's why people are so sick.
And that's why I kind of have changed my focus on this podcast and focusing on the fit and healthy from the inside out because so many athletes,
Mhm.
even that are not low carb, they think because I exercise regularly, I do marathons, Ironmans,
Right.
50K trail runs, cycling, I can eat whatever I want.
That's
And
right.
I keep trying to show, okay, here's what happens with oxidative stress, your insulin levels, your CRP, and really look at all these lab markers and okay, what are you doing to yourself just because you exercise? And then often people sit all day. It's like
Right.
we got to work on the whole person. So that's kind of my purpose to share more stories as your story on carnivore and how you have to navigate through things and work on the lifestyle habits as well as the nutrition.
Yeah.
But before we wrap up this part, I want to go into exercise part of it is what do you eat? Are you adding dairy or you just meat? Kind of what's your meal plan that works best for you?
I eat too much dairy. Most of the time, I eat too much dairy because it is highly addictive too. I've given it up multiple times over the last 3 years and 3 months. And I do feel better without it, but it also brings quite a bit of joy with the day. And so I think if I can moderate it, and most of the time I can moderate it, but I do probably eat too much of it even still, even with
Like
moderation.
cheese or what's dairy to you? What's your
Cheese and
favorite?
heavy cream in my latte that I make.
I have.
I drink a decaf latte almost every day, and make it
Hmm.
with an espresso machine. And I use heavy cream and a little bit of milk, so it'll froth better. And I put some butter in it. I didn't think the milk would froth I didn't think
Yeah.
it would steam and froth with the butter, but it does. And so I make that, and I don't have it every day, but I have it probably 4 times a week. So that's got quite a bit of dairy in it. And when I eat a hamburger, I almost always put some cheese on it, and I
Mhm.
do, have some cheese dip on occasion. But I definitely incorporate a little bit too much of the dairy products for sure. But what was the other thing you asked me just now?
Well, just more dairy. It was the first question because I always think like, how can you not do heavy cream? And I
Yeah,
know
right.
strict carnivores are no coffee. Like I like my coffee, but I could do decaf too. It's not. I don't
Right.
do coffee for the
Right.
caffeine. It's just
Yes.
enjoyment, like you said. It's like, oh, we go to
Right.
bed at night. Go, oh, I can't wait to wake up and have my
Yes.
coffee.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. So when I was having that taste and smell issue, I actually struggled through my coffee for a long time. And then I gave it up for about a year and a half. And it was hard. It was 2.5 very sad, almost like
Yeah,
lonely weeks. It
that's
was
not
like,
good.
yeah, I mean, I've been drinking coffee since I was 8 and learned to drink
Oh,
coffee at AA meetings with my mom. I mean, that's how I learned to drink coffee. And I've been drinking coffee almost every day since then. I gave it up during my first pregnancy because I thought I was supposed to, but not after my other ones. And I've always had a cup of coffee in the morning. And so I weaned myself off of it so I didn't get headaches, but I was pretty sad. I was really, really
mm,
sad. Like coffee is a whole culture, right? Everywhere. Like, and I remember when I gave it up, like watching TV and movies and going places and watching other people with their cups of coffee. Everybody's got a cup of coffee at our girls' basketball and volleyball games. We make and sell coffee. Like, there's coffee everywhere you go. Somebody's drinking coffee. Every movie, every TV show, somebody's drinking a cup of coffee. Like, made me really sad. Friends get together and they go out and they have a cup of coffee. It was so hard to give that up. It was
mm,
like losing a piece of myself. And I
yeah.
didn't drink it for more than a year.
Mm.
And then when my taste and smell got better last summer, the day that it got better, I cried for a long time while I was smelling things in the house. And the very first thing I did was made myself a cup of decaf. And I still find though now that a regular cup of coffee from if I make it at home in our Keurig, or if I have one at somebody else's house, doesn't really taste like coffee. It doesn't taste bad anymore, but it doesn't really taste like coffee. But the trick that I have learned is if I grind the beans myself fresh and make it in my
Mm,
espresso machine, it tastes and smells like coffee. And so that's actually why
yes.
we got the espresso machine. Because once I realized that it actually would taste and smell like coffee if I grind the beans fresh and make it, then I have, then I was like, well, I have to be able to do this all the time. I mean, I have to be able, that's not fair. I have to be able to have my cup of coffee. Because what I noticed was on the rare occasion that I would stop at Starbucks and get a decaf, it tasted and smelled like coffee. And it was like, why is that? Why? And so what I realized is that it was probably because their beans are more freshly ground. And so that works for me. But yeah, coffee is a whole culture. Like, and I know a lot of people have given it up on carnivore. And so when I added it back in, I added in decaf instead of regular coffee, because once I got through that withdrawal process and that sadness and everything, like I didn't want to ever have to do that again. So now I just drink the decaf when I do have it a few times a week.
Mhm. Yeah, when I had my adrenal exhaustion when I was a mess 10 years ago, I had to remove coffee for a while. I think it was 3 months, or 6 months, but it was a hard
Yeah.
transition
Yeah.
to,
It's hard.
what can I replace this with? And that's similar and it's really hard. So
Yeah.
another question I wanted to get to is support and being in a household. Does your family eat that way? Or I mean, when you have food, can't moderate certain foods, do you have to have your whole house a safe place and your spouse
Um,
work it with you?
no, and I think, that's something I learned a long time ago is how to deal with that, because my family has very rarely ever done what I'm doing, except for the times I made them all drink celery juice every morning because it was supposed to be so good for us. But they have done other things with me, but nothing kind of this extreme. Like my house used to be mostly just whole natural foods, and as the kids got older, of course, little things, creep in and stuff. But I have two adult children who one of them eats really healthy, one of them doesn't eat healthy. And then we have a 17 and a 15-year-old that I'm still kind of responsible, for what they eat. And they eat pretty healthy. Like they don't eat a lot of refined sugar. They don't eat a lot of processed foods. I've tried to kind of switch some of the things that are processed over to, the healthier version of that. Like if they want the macaroni and cheese, they eat the Annie's organic or gluten-free macaroni and cheese, or, things like that. We've always been like that with those kinds of foods. So that's not something that I ever had to switch, but there are a lot of things where I've been like, oh, why don't you eat this one instead? This one's better for you. I don't buy anything with wheat in it for the house. Typically, the house is almost always gluten-free for the last maybe 11 or 12 years. And so there's not a lot of that in the house, but there are some processed foods in the house because my family doesn't eat like I do, but we are pretty meat and protein heavy. My girls eat whatever meat I'm making. And then if they want something on the side, typically they're kind of responsible for that. And I've tried to kind of switch any other side dishes over to fruit for the most part. And so, I'll get out raspberries and strawberries with dinner for them. They're not keto by any stretch of the imagination. And they do a lot of sports, and switching them over, in the middle of a sport would be hard for them. But they eat pretty healthy. So I can't really complain, and I can't force it. My kids are too old to force it. If I had young kids, I would totally empty out all the cabinets and get rid of all the condiments, and the refrigerator would just be like meat, eggs, and cheese.
Yeah.
But they're older. They're too old for that. Like, I'm not willing to sacrifice my relationship with my children. It's too important to me. And I'd like to get to a point, I've heard Karen Miles talk about this a lot, that, if her grandchild offers her a bite of a cookie, she's going to take it. And I would love to get to a point where, when I have grandkids, that I can do that. And even now I am trying to learn. My girls made this delicious all natural rice pilaf the other day, and they really wanted me to taste it. And it's not like pressure from them to eat the bad stuff necessarily. It's just, Mom, this is so good. Will you taste it? And I did. And I was able to just have the one bite. I wanted more. That was hard. I wanted more. Like, rice is one of those things for me that I wanted a lot of. I wanted a lot of that rice. And it tasted delicious. It was made with chicken broth. It was all natural. They made it in my house. And I do think for people who eat those things, there is a huge difference between making it at home yourself like that versus buying a box of rice-a-roni rice pilaf. So
Minute-made. Minute-made rice in the microwave. My mom used to make that.
Right. Yeah.
That's not rice.
If you're going to eat those things, make them yourself though. And so I'm learning to be able to take that one bite and say to my kids, wow, that's really good. You did a good job, but it was very hard. I'd like to get to a point where it's not that hard, but they love to cook. They cook a lot. They make a lot of their own stuff like that. And so I want to be able to get to that point where it's not hard for me anymore. And I also don't think there's anything wrong with the one bite that my kids made for me, that they say, Mom, will you taste this? Now they're not trying to make me feel guilty. They're not trying to make me sick. It's just, these are my kids genuinely want my opinion on the rice they just made. And that's important too.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I coach people. I call the holistic method I created 10 years ago. As my full-time job in my previous life was personal trainer, triathlon, cycling, running coach, and athlete. And now I focus on the holistic method to work on the whole person, because exercise, I couldn't help people with just training them once, twice, 3 times a week. And nutrition is so important, as we were talking about, to help people feel, look, move their best as they age. And as I keep talking about on my platform, is your future self, which you're talking about as well, and doing what we can do now to create our ideal self in the future, I think is so essential. So the aging process, but the other elements of my holistic method, I think, is so important: is sleep quality, stress management, and identifying those sources of external stressors and internal stressors. But also, I'll just go through exercise. Well, I want to go into a little more, but then there's digestion and gut health, which you're talking about. This is helping. And then hydration, mineral balance, which I know years ago I did a podcast with Danny Vega. We went over all the minerals, the micronutrients that are in a carnivore-based diet. It's pretty fascinating. And then the last one, I think, is so important, that you mentioned a little bit about happiness, gratitude, play, laughter, still enjoying life. And I think that is a huge part, especially for a lot of my followers are high performers, type A, triple A, that we get so serious about things that we forget to put the fun part in, and being grateful and thankful. So I anything on that you can jump into, but I want to make sure we leave time for exercise and carnivore, because that is where I was like, well, I'm not going to eat eggs or steak and then go swimming. So how have you found with you? I know you've been lifting weights and doing really great in your exercise, but how have you found carnivore and timing your meals in and around for workout and various intensities?
Well, first I want to touch on the happiness thing real quick. We tie our happiness to our food, and that's not the way it should be. Food is for nutrition. And I know that sounds very boring, but the food doesn't have to be boring for it to be nutritious and make you happy. And so I think that's huge. I think everything we do, every party, every school function, every day, there's some sort of a party that we could go to that is going to revolve around food. And most of the food there is going to be junk food, processed foods, even things that people think are homemade are just garbage, typically, just because you made it at home. If it came out of a box, doesn't make it homemade. And so I think it's so important to eat those one ingredient foods as much as we can and find our happiness in that, find our happiness in how good the steak tastes with butter on it and how nutrient dense that is for our bodies, and find joy in knowing that you're doing the best thing for your body at that function, and that you're able to like look around that function, look around. Don't you want to just be normal? People will say all the time, no, I don't want to be. When you look around and you see what normal looks like, acts like, and feels like, that's not a place that I want to be. If that's normal, count me out. Like,
That's
that
so
is
true.
that is not something that I want. And so next time you go to a function, family gathering, a party, a sporting event where you're with a group of people and everybody's eating and they seem really happy eating their, M&Ms and drinking their Mountain Dew and eating their slice of pizza from the concession stand, but look at them, right? They seem happy, but they're on, especially if they're my age, I'm 51, even in their 40s, sometimes in their 30s, they're taking 2, 3, 4, 5 medications. Their blood pressure is high, their cholesterol is high, they're taking a statin. Every time they stand up, they got to hunch over because their back hurts, because all their muscles hurt, because all their joints are inflamed. Like, these are not happy people. They might seem happy in the moment, eating the pizza, drinking the soda, and eating the candy, but those are not really happy people, and they're certainly not healthy. So when people ask me if I just want to be normal, I don't. And I think that we need to figure out a way to tie our healthy one ingredient whole foods to happiness. If it needs to be about the happiness that comes from food, if your food needs to make you joyful, then you need to figure out how to find the joy in eating the whole natural foods that God made for us to eat, that don't have to be processed in a plant, that don't have to be made in a facility, that don't have scientists figuring out that bliss point to make us addicted to it. That's where we need to find our joy, is in the healthier foods. And you can certainly go to a party and you can enjoy the party and you can eat whole natural foods and feel really good at the end of the day, knowing that you did the right thing for your body. Our body is a temple. We only get one. Treat it as such.
Good on you. Yeah, that's a good soapbox speech. I like that. It's so
Thanks.
perfect.
And
Right.
then timing my meals.
Yeah.
I don't really eat before I exercise. It makes me feel heavy. I try not to even have my latte before I exercise if I can help it, because it's just so thick, I don't like to run or even really walk on a full stomach. Now I will take an after dinner, digestion walk, sometimes, but I don't really like to really exercise on a full stomach. So if I know that I'm lifting weights this morning, chances are I won't eat. If I'm supposed to lift weights this afternoon, there's a chance I won't eat before that either, even if it's not till this afternoon. Because I prefer to work out fasted, whether it's going for a walk or doing some sprinting. I don't really run as much anymore as I used to, but running, walking, sprinting, lifting weights, doing HIIT workouts. I don't like to do any of those things on a full stomach. And so I typically will, if I know I'm working out, I typically won't eat. But there are times where I'll go ahead and have a can of sardines before I go for a walk or something, if it's getting late or if I just start to feel really hungry. But I typically don't like to eat before I work out.
Yeah, that's one thing I'm not going to be doing. Everyone loves this sardine challenge. And Annette, you were on her show, Dr. Boz. I've actually never eaten them before, so I can't really say I hate them. Just sardines, anchovies, all those little fish in a can. Ugh.
Okay. I will tell you that I don't like them either. And for the first year and a half, every time I ate a can, I basically had to close my eyes. I would cover it in mustard and scarf it down as fast as I could. I couldn't look at them because they still had the skin on. They don't have heads and tails, which most people think they do. They don't have heads and tails. But even the ones with the skin and the bones, I don't like to look at them. I don't want my food to still look like the animal that it is.
Yeah, that's
These
me.
they still look like fish.
Can't do
But I
that.
did it for a year and a half. But then Courtney Luna found the King Oscar brand. I think Kelly recommends this brand now too. The King Oscar in the red box in olive oil. They don't have the skin and they don't have the bones. And it literally looks like a little tuna fillet. And this one, a lot of times I dump out the olive oil. Dr. Boss says the fat's really important. So if you eat them in water, you have to add butter or tallow or like a really good homemade mayonnaise or avocado oil mayonnaise or something like that, because the fat is really important. And so a lot of times I dump out the olive oil, put them on a plate and mash them up and either mix them with a homemade mayonnaise or with a good quality avocado oil mayonnaise, and salt it and pepper it. Sometimes I'll put a little bit of lemon pepper on it. It really does taste like tuna. I mean, it really does. So if you're on the fence, you feel like you can't eat the sardines, go for the King Oscar in the red box, no bones and no skin. And it really does taste a lot like tuna fish. So, I mean, I recommend trying it because I have noticed a huge difference in my energy and in my battery's about to, I noticed a huge difference in my energy levels and in my ketones and my glucose numbers. Like I've done just sardines for 7 days and watched my ketones go all the way up to like 5.6 and my glucose come all the way down to actually an unhealthy range of 47 at one point.
Oh, wow, really
way too low. And then I went back to regular carnivore for 7 days, same calories, same macros every single day as I did with the sardines, just to see what would happen. 75-25 were my macros, 75% fat, 25% protein. And my glucose went back up and my ketones came back down, eating my regular carnivore at those macros. And then I tried adding sardines back in just for breakfast and lunch and eating like steak or burgers for dinner. And my glucose continued to come down, not quite as low, and my ketones continued to go up. There is something about the sardines. They are magic little fishies. I don't know what it is. Dr. Boz doesn't know what it is. It's probably the omega-3s, but I've done it like that too, like just adding the sardines into a regular day, basically, and it's still magical. So if you can get them in, if you can figure it out, they're really amazing. Day 3 of a sardine fast is you feel euphoric, and then day 4 is where the numbers jump, like ketones will go up 2 points overnight and your glucose will come down 15 or 20 points overnight. I mean, it's just day 4 is where the magic numbers happen, but you start to feel amazing on day 3. So if you can ever work it out and make yourself do it, it really is crazy amazing.
Wow. Yeah. Well, maybe I'll make it like you did. I know my husband Neil can just eat them on it out of the can, and I'm always like, ugh. We said earlier, I don't like to see the animal I'm eating. You know, growing up, even turkey on Thanksgiving, just give me the turkey slice on my plate. Don't show me the whole stuff, and don't show me the parts that you're boiling to make gravy. Just give it to me.
I'm
Gross.
the same way. I'm the same way.
Yeah. No, feel like I'm eating roadkill, but anyways, I know we're running out of time so fast, and we'll do an Instagram live another day to answer Q&As because I think we get a lot of interesting questions after this. I think that was most of my question. Oh, we didn't get to heart disease.
Yeah.
I know we have just like 4 minutes, but anything, I think the biggest question I would think to wrap up with is people being scared to do an all meat animal-based diet because of their cholesterol markers, and I'm going to get heart disease. And, you know, we need to eat plant foods because we need all those benefits from nutrients from plants that somehow people don't think you get from animal meat diet. So what are your kind of 2 minutes on that topic? It's hour long.
Well, yeah, I think that we're scared needlessly. That information came from somebody named Ansel Keys. And so if you really want an eye-opener awakening, read Nina Teich-Schultz, The Big Fat Surprise. Best nonfiction book I've ever read. I've actually listened to it 6 times on Audible. 6 times.
That's for the biggest book I've ever read. I had to read it for nutritional therapy practitioner program, and it took me forever, but that book makes you so angry.
So
at the same time, right? Oh.
So angry. And I talked to somebody recently who said that people think that Ansel Keys killed more people than Hitler, the biggest mass murderer of all time, because he's the one that put us on this low fat, low cholesterol trend.
One person. It's amazing.
One person. If you don't believe that, read the book. You'll be shocked. But Nina's book is amazing, and we're scared needlessly of fat. Saturated fat is not bad for us. There are actually higher instances of Alzheimer's and Parkinson's disease in people, and dementia in people that have low cholesterol. So we take all of these older patients, all these older people who are, you know, their cholesterol is high. We put them on a cholesterol lowering medication. They end up in a nursing home because of dementia. And there have been studies where they take them off of their medication, their cholesterol lowering medication and their dementia medication, feed them a couple of really good fatty steaks, and that same day they remember things they couldn't remember the day before. And so I think do some research, do some really good research, follow Dr. Berry, follow Dr. Chafee. Dr. Berg has some great information on why cholesterol is not bad for us. There are some really great cardiologists that talk about why fat is not bad for us. There are so many, Dr. Sean O'Mara is amazing. There's so many doctors that are advocating for a higher fat, high animal protein diet. And that is how we have a longer future, is eating that way. After more than 3 years, my cholesterol is fine, but even if my cholesterol was high, I wouldn't worry about it. But my cholesterol is 177, and I just had a CAC scan done last month, and my CAC scan is 0. My score was 0 after more than 3 years of eating lots of butter, lots of red meat, up to 12 or 15 eggs a day, sausage, bacon almost every day. And all of my numbers are fine.
Yeah, I know. My cholesterol, I just had my test, has always been a little higher, but I was at 240. But I look at my LPA little a and the APOB, and I've always had a super high HDL, and my triglycerides are low, and my CRP is nothing. So I think it's always trying to explain to people, look at the information and listen to all those doctors, which today they're all in San Diego at the Low Carb USA conference. Yesterday started, and it was all mental health because I was going to go today, and I was like, well, I don't want to focus on mental health, even though I know it's essential for ketones, but they are all there, and they meet once a year at that conference and other ones, but they release those afterwards. Same with the Metabolic Health Summit. If you want to learn more, you can go to their website and get the recordings of them at a good price. So I think it's essential to, if you don't know what you don't know, educate yourself, look at the research that's not funded by pharmaceutical drugs companies.
Right. Or by food companies.
Yeah, food. Well, I kind of put that in the same category. Food and pharmaceutical, the people that run the show and influence all of our guidelines. So where can people find more? And our eye cream, one of your side businesses that we had at my meetup that I have in September at our house. It's our 3rd year this year, but you have a great eye cream and website and coaching now. Tell us where to find you.
Yeah, so I make lotions made out of beef tallow, emu oil, and wild camel hump fat, and some goose fat in the lip balm, because it's really good for your lips and it's good at reducing frequency of and getting rid of cold sores. So I put a lot of thought into the essential oils that are in the scented versions of my products. They are essential oils that are clinically proven to help heal your skin and get rid of fine lines and wrinkles and things like that. So I have lots of products at purelytallow.com. I even have some tallow-based candles, because candles are so toxic. I think anywhere we can reduce some toxins in our life, that's what we should do. And so one of the great places to do that is for your skincare products, and then candles, because they're so toxic. So purelytallow.com for that. I also have a YouTube channel called the carnivorerevolution.com. Called the Carnivore Revolution. And you can go there and you can watch videos. I do lots of interviews like this, lots of success stories, just talk to normal people about why they eat the way they do and why they do either low carb or whole foods and things like that. And then you can find me on Instagram at serena.carnivore.
Amazing. Yeah, I think YouTube's a great place. I've been trying to just post everything there the last year because I just find it, I think people like watching the videos, and I just think it's more fun and just easy to find other like podcasts, because they'll say, oh, if you watch this, like, and then you have all these others, so you can keep learning more.
It's true.
Well, keep it up. Thank you. And we'll do an Instagram live to talk a little bit more. And I appreciate your time today and all your experiences and energy and joy you're finding and sharing with others.
Thank you so much, Debbie.